السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. لعلها زيارة حج شجاعة نثرت الحبور في زمن صعب، وهو لقاء قيادتين روحيتين شامختين تواضعا في عاصمة العلم المتجدد اجتهادا وتقدمية النجف الأشرف، وفي جولة عبر أرض الرافدين من أقصاها إلى أقصاها، وبمحطات طابعها ديني وجوهرها تعميق أواصر الأخوة والسلام في ظل سماء متلبدة بجو سياسي دولي شديد التعقيد. ولأن الأخوة أقوى من القتل، ولأن السلام أقوى من الحرب، ولأن التلاقي والعودة إلى الأرض والجذور أقوى من أي منطق، كانت هذه القمة الروحية التاريخية العابرة لكل اعوجاج وخيبات، فلا للتطبيع ولمعاناة الشعب الفلسطيني في الأراضي المحتلة، ولا للحصار الاقتصادي والتهجير، ولا للعنف، ولا للظلم والقهر والاضطهاد، ولا للفقر والتجويع المستشريين، ولا لغياب العدالة الاجتماعية، ولا لكبت الحريات الدينية في كل مكان. نعم، لتثبيت قيم التآلف والتعايش السلمي والتضامن الإنساني، ولتغليب جانب العقل لدى القوى العظمى، ولمقاربة وفهم ثقافة التلاقي التي لطالما نادى بها الحبر الأعظم البابا فرنسيس، ودعوة المسيحيين للعودة إلى مدنهم التي انسلخوا عنها بسبب الإرهاب التكفيري في العراق الحبيب. يطيب لنا أن نستقبل من هيوستن تكساس الأستاذ كريغ كونسوداين، أستاذ علم الاجتماع في جامعة رايس، مؤلف العديد من الكتب عن العلاقات الإسلامية المسيحية في أمريكا، ومنها كتاب إنسانية محمد عن رسول الإسلام صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم. وأيضا نرحب بالناشطة العراقية الاميريكية رين من شيكاغو إلينوي، مديرة المعهد الآشوري للسياسات. أهلا بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من الداخل، معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. Craig Considine, professor of sociology at Rice University in Houston, Texas, author of The Humanity of Muhammad, A Christian View, and Ren Hanna, director of community relations at the Assyrian Universal Alliance Foundation in the US of A. Welcome to Min al-Dakhil from the inside, Craig and Ren.
Greetings.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Pure pleasure to have you both. To start with you, Dr. Craig, Pope Francis' first core signature phrase is the culture of encounter, a cornerstone to his worldview. Might you elaborate on the intrinsic and fundamental meaning of the culture of encounter and how the Pope practices what he preaches today and projects this idea through his emblematic visit to Iraq, stressing on meeting Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani at his modest home?
Sure, Zainab. So the culture of encounter has been really a pillar of Pope Francis's mission and ethos since he became the Pope. Mm-hmm. And really, like, what we're getting at here with the culture of encounter is fundamentally getting to know what we might broadly refer to as the other. So getting to know people that don't look like us, don't think like us, don't believe like us. And Pope Francis is encouraging us to not merely meet with each other at a very kind of superficial level of just kind of meeting to please someone. He's actually telling us, like, let's get into an authentic understanding and an authentic relationship with one another where we can have a deeper sense of brotherhood and sisterhood and humanity. And this is what he brought to Iraq, not merely for the Christian community, right? But in meeting the Muslim communities of various walks and letting them know that the past is the past and it's time to reconcile the past, and there's a new kind of encounter of rebuilding, of hope, and of prosperity.
Ren, allow me, I will come back to ask you later, Dr. Konsodine, about the meaning of the sense of the meeting between those two pillars in both religions. But allow me to ask Ren, Pope Francis has often contrasted the culture of encounter with what he called a throwaway culture, meaning a society in which whole categories of people, like the elderly, the ill, the poor, and so on, are regarded as disposable. Do you think that various components and communities in Iraq have suffered the throwaway culture? And if so, why? You talked about the erasing of Assyrians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point to make, and I would love to echo, the points that Dr. Craig made. I think that this is a very important moment for Iraq in general, so not just for the Christian communities, but really, we're seeing this push to move towards greater religious tolerance, greater acceptance, and I think you mentioned that there are these groups that have historically been marginalized in Iraqi society. Of course, the elderly, the disabled, and also minoritized communities, right, like Yazidis, like Assyrians, and others. And I think that now, that this visit has happened, this historic visit from the Pope, there is an opportunity not only to shed greater light on, the challenges that these communities face, but also to take tangible actions to improve their status in the country, and that starts with actions. This visit was an important start, and it's a great way to raise awareness and to bring greater visibility to some of these challenges. But the challenge now for Iraqi authorities and for Kurdish authorities in the north is to actually take these ideas that they were preaching about this weekend, coexistence and other things, and actually put them into practice.
Right. We will talk about the challenges further, Ren. Dr. Craig, the Pope had come to Iraq at a perilous but important time. The nation is recovered from the brutality of ISIS, but is still facing violence, though. There is an economic downfall and a swell of coronavirus cases, not to mention a very complex international and regional political atmosphere. By choosing Iraq as his first destination since the pandemic began, could the papal visit spur any changes, in your opinion? The meaning of it and then the changes.
Well, I think Iraq is a symbolic case for the kind of resetting of relations, of trying to reignite a new period, a new mission. Because what we've seen in Iraq since 2003 has been absolutely heartbreaking, where you have Christians and Muslims suffering greatly. And the state itself is trying to rebuild, and Pope Francis is doing exactly this with his mission. He's trying to rebuild, he's trying to reconcile, he's trying to not merely put a Band-Aid on a wound, he's trying to perform surgery on the wound that needs substantial work, if you can follow my example there. So I think that's why he chose Iraq. It's hugely symbolic. And yeah.
Ren, I would like also to direct this question to you. Why do you believe that the Pope's first spot was to go to Iraq?
So I think there are a great number of reasons that certainly factored into, into his decision to go to Iraq specifically. And I think what, Dr. Craig said is so true, that this is a community, this is a people, the Iraqi people, so including Muslims, Christians, and, all different ethnic groups have really suffered since 2003. And there's been this shared sense of pain. And of course, the experiences of the individual communities might be different. But I think that now more than ever, there is a desire to move forward from, the violent past that they've endured together. And there is an important opportunity here to create a new Iraq, and an Iraq where everyone is welcome, where everyone is equal. Obviously, we are a long way from attaining that goal, but I think what we've seen now, with the recent protests and with the calls for greater tolerance and whatnot, Iraqi people are demanding this type of future,
right.
And so that's why
yes.
he wanted to really come in and be part of this conversation and help move
right.
it along.
Allow me, Ren, to ask you about a specific thing, which is your home country. We all know that Iraq is a rich tapestry of faiths. Iraq has been hollowed out as extremism hardened. All its ethnic religious communities have suffered due to terrorism, to war and extreme violence. Specifically looking at the situation for Assyrians, Christians, what was the significance of the Pope visiting Qarakosh in Nineveh plain, which was occupied by ISIS just 6 years ago?
It's a great question, Zainab. And as you mentioned, so in 2003, the estimated population of Assyrians or Christians was around 1.5 million. Now we're seeing that number is, potentially as low as 200,000. Obviously, that represents a very steep decline over the course of the past 2 decades. So for this community in particular, I think the Pope's visit was extremely symbolic and certainly helped restore a sense of hope, I think, for this community that for so long has not had has not felt that they've been heard, has not felt seen, and has really suffered and has been left to suffer alone, really. And so I think the visit to Qarakosh, or Bardeda, as Assyrians call it, was immensely significant because, as you mentioned, it was occupied by ISIS just 5 years ago. But beyond that, Qarakosh in particular represents the resilience of this community because not only has the community returned, but they've returned in significant numbers due to the security situation there. They feel more secure. But beyond that, there is this desire to not only return, but to rebuild, and slowly we start to see life coming back to it. I mean, I was speaking to a woman from the town just the other day, and she said, I had no idea that I was ever going to return to my home. Now I'm back and the Pope is coming. So it was a really, really, on a spiritual level, I think it was very deeply symbolic for the community there. But of course, it has to be matched by actions moving forward.
And perhaps this was one of his core messages that, calling on people, particularly the Christians, to come back home. Ren, Hannah, Dr. Craig, Konsodine, allow me to stop for a short break and we will continue to talk about the implications of the Pope's visit to Iraq. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا. أهلا بكم من جديد. Dr. Craig, Konsodine, Ren Hanna, welcome back to this special edition of من الداخل. Dr. Craig, the Pope said that over the past several decades, Iraq has suffered the disastrous effects of war and the scourge of terrorism. We believers cannot be silent when terrorism abuses religion. Craig, as a Christian, a devoted Catholic, believers cannot be silent when terrorism abuses religion. How can we protect all communities' rights in our region instead of hollowing out the region of its peoples like the Palestinians and components like the Christians, original components? Why can't the superpowers help them stay?
Well, I think first and foremost, internally, nation states today need to emphasize the importance of what we would refer to broadly as civic rights. So civic rights allow for freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, and ultimately these are protected by a constitution. It's protected by the law. So this is egalitarian and it's democratic. And this is really, really important because it establishes a sense of belonging that is not tied to a race or an ethnicity or a culture or a religion. What makes you part of a nation is the law. and the law allows for diversity. So with Western powers like the United States and the UK and France, they need to practice what they preach at home abroad. And they need to support governments and leaders who are actively committed to this civic orientation of a nation state. This is so important in our modern world because our countries are increasingly diverse. You can't build a country on tribalism. You have to build it on ideas.
Right. Now, Ren, what impact do you think the Pope's visit will have in Iraq and for its future? Specifically, what impact will it have for the status of Christians in the country?
I think that moving forward, the Pope's visit has really emphasized that this community needs to feel like an equal part of Iraqi society. And I think this not only has shined a light on the issues and the ongoing challenges that Christians or Assyrians face in the country. I think a lot of people thought that, with the territorial defeat of ISIS, that the problems had ended. There are still many challenges that they're facing. So hopefully, this moment can be sort of a unifying moment for the Iraqi community at large, and we can start to see this meaningful push towards, again, greater religious tolerance, respect of civic rights, as Dr. Craig was talking about. But I think the importance is really I want to emphasize one of the points that he made as well. It's so important for Western actors, for the United States and European governments and whatnot, to really hold their partners in the region to these ideas as well. And so I think, obviously the Iraqi government has a long way to go, but I think a lot of the times the Kurdistan regional government is presented as this protector of minorities or protector of Christians, when that narrative really masks a violent reality that minorities on the ground, like Assyrians, are contending with. So I think there would be, greater accountability for these types of actors, and a greater push for equality for all Iraqis.
Right. What is the thing that you would like to ask Dr. Craig about, that you call on him, for example, to try and raise this issue about what the Christians are facing in Iraq, Ren?
I guess I would ask, what tangible steps do you think that maybe civic society groups can take to help build, this culture of reconciliation, and help heal, some of the damage that has been caused, I guess, in the course of the last few years. I think, there's a long way to go in terms of healing, but where is a good starting point for communities that, have historically had tensions perhaps, or, more recently?
This is a really important point, and I think I actually use a metaphor called deuce. And Zainab, I think you may be familiar with it through our previous conversations, but it stands for dialogue, education, understanding, commitment, and engagement. And the true way to begin the repairment of the bridge is to have a dialogue. And this dialogue begins not merely by talking about our religious similarities. It begins by talking about things that are a lot more fundamental than that. So we're talking about being a dad, a mom, a son, a daughter, a human. Once you develop this basic kind of level of understanding and trust, then we can begin to educate one another. This is when we can start dismantling the stereotypes and the misinformation. Once we've developed the trust through dialogue and the education, then we can start seeing eye to eye. We understand one another at a deeper level. When we have that, we move on to commitment. And this is when we can actually outline, hey, this is what we stand for. We are committing ourselves to these principles. And then once you've established that, you go out into society and you engage and you actually be this example to the world. You show the world that we are Christian, we are Muslim, or whatever group we're talking about, and we're working together. So this is actually a step-by-step process that I've used in my own talks, and I hope that it would be successful in any society, let alone Iraq.
Right, and to add to this, this exactly echoes the culture of encounter, which is in a simple way, not just seeing, but looking, not just hearing, but listening, not just passing by people, but stopping with them not just saying what a shame, poor people, but allowing yourself to be moved with compassion and then to draw near, to touch and to say, do not weep, and to give at least a drop of life. This were the exact words used by Pope Francis there. What value, Dr. Craig, would the Pope's message of coexistence in Iraq have delivered for the humble from the modest premises of the most powerful and respected religious figure in Iraq, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani?
Well, I'd say this. I think what Pope Francis is really kind of getting at here is a reimagining or perhaps of a return on fundamental components of Christian identity, moving away from this kind of triumphalism of saying that, you know, we are Christians, therefore we are better than people. He's getting to the root. He's going back to Jesus. How did Jesus live his life? Jesus lived his life in a way of trying to repair the wounds that have been inflicted upon humanity through various things, through corruption, through disease, and so on and so forth. And with the Pope's meeting with Ayatollah Sistani, he is effectively trying to repair these broken wounds that these wounds that we have seen develop over the years through war, through poverty, through terrorism. So Pope Francis is living his example. He's living his Christianity. He's not just preaching it. He's not just talking about it. He's trying to live it through other people and through his actions and his relations with other people. And I think this is very powerful. And I think, too, Zainab, Muslims see that and they resonate with that.
Right.
And they like that.
Right, beautiful. My last question to you, Ren, please. What are some of the ongoing challenges facing Assyrians in Iraq today? Briefly, if I may ask.
Sure. So there are a great number of challenges, and of course we can't cover them all today. I would say security remains an ongoing concern, especially in places like the Nineveh Plain, where it's divided among different actors. There's political repression, especially in the areas where the KRG is in control. And then, there are concerns about the upcoming elections in October, because historically, especially in the last decade and a half, we've seen that Assyrian political representation has been stolen by dominant, political parties and majority groups. So there's a lot, and hopefully I can join you again in the future, and maybe we can look, more closely at some of these issues. But religious freedom continues to be a challenge, and hopefully again with this visit we'll start to see some changes going forward.
Right, Craig Konsodine, professor of sociology at Rice University in Houston, Texas, and Ren Hanna, director of the community relations at the Assyrian Universal Alliance Foundation in USA. Thank you very much for being such kindred spirits. This is the word that Dr. Craig likes a lot. And candles, actually, of encounter. Bless your hearts and be safe.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you for being a voice for minorities and using your platform to spread awareness.
Always welcome. Thank you, Dr. Craig.
Amen. Thank you. God bless.
Bless you too. Pleasure always to have you both. والشكر لكم مشاهدينا الكرام على طيب المتابعة. للتفاعل أكثر تابعونا على صفحات السوشيال ميديا، وحتى نلتقي من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.